Thank you, Adam, and thank you everyone for joining today. Today's session is about Salesforce Dx CLI CICD pipeline scripts, and this is presented to you by Salesforce Women in Tech Group, Ashburn, United States, and
Hey guys, welcome to our seminar today. This is going to be an awesome session on the Sfdx pipeline scripts. So this is Guha Anand from the Salesforce developer community in McLean, Virginia. And I'm welcoming my group and also the Ashburn Women in Tech. And thank you so much, Adam Best, for providing us a great session today. Back to you, Dylan.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Adam, for joining today. Looking forward to an amazing session.
Thank you, Gurleen, and thank you, Guha, and thank you everyone for coming. So before we begin, you've probably seen this slide before, and it's a new year, and because Salesforce has lots and lots of innovation, we've innovated to 2 slides of the forward-looking statement. Now this slide, or these 2 slides, is a gentle reminder to make any purchasing decisions based off features generally available today. And I think we had a quick thanks, but we'll do it again. We'll really appreciate your time. Guha and Gurleen, I really appreciate the invitation. It's presentations like these that really go deep diving into particular areas, and hopefully you get lots of value out of it to make you and your customer successful. So some logistics, if you have a question, we'll pop it in the chat panel. In Zoom, there will be a place for chat. Pop it in the chat panel. Throughout the session, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end of this session. So I think our run time is about 35 minutes presentation, 25 Q&A. So plenty of time for Q&A. We will be recording this session today, and that will be posted in the Salesforce Women for Tech Ashburn group and also the Salesforce developer group, McLean, United States. And the slide deck that we're presenting today, coupled with all the code samples, will also be available along with the recording. So my name's Adam Best. I'm from Professional Services, which is part of the Customer Success Group. So if you haven't heard of that, that's okay. I'm probably just like you, a trailblazer, helping customers be successful and get the best out of their Salesforce investment. So I'm very happy to be here and share the good things that we've been doing. So what is Salesforce Dx? And you know what? This presentation was marketed as it was good for admins and developers of all levels, and that's because we're going to be covering the basics of Salesforce Dx all the way down to some code as well. So everyone's going to get value from today. But let's start with what Salesforce Dx is. Salesforce Dx is a complete open set of platform development tools to build and test and ship apps from anywhere. So it includes things that you're already using today. You're already using the app builder and the flow builder and the process builder. There's a few pilots on your screen there. So just a reminder, that forward-looking statement. So in pilot, we've got code builder and DevOps center, but it also includes those infrastructures we already love and use today, like sandboxes and scratch orgs, okay? It does also include other tooling to help with build and release, such as source control and CICD. So if we're going to deploy, let's talk about the development models that we have. We have 2 development models. The first one is the org unpackaged, and you probably be using that development model today. So if you're developing on a sandbox and you create a change set, then you move that code and those components from one sandbox to another and also to production, then you're using the org development model. The right-hand side is called the package development model. And so if you've heard the word Scratch org, then Scratch org is where you will develop a package, and then you will bundle up that package, and that is installed similar to a managed package on the path to production. We're going to be talking about the org development model today. This is the area that most people are still in today. If you do have any questions about the right-hand side, the package development model, more than happy to answer those at the end. So, as we just alluded to, the org, unpackaged development model, we develop on a sandbox. And if we're going a little bit further than change sets, we will use something called source control to commit code. So first of all, we develop on a sandbox, and then we use something like Visual Studio Code or another IDE to bring it down to your PC or Mac. And then we check that into source control, and then using something called Salesforce CLI and a CICD system that will then be deployed on multiple sandboxes all the way to production. So if you're in the CBU or enterprise space, this particular path to production might look familiar to you. So you're developing on dev sandboxes, you might have an integration or QA sandbox to test that built code. That then goes up to another sandbox for maybe a bit of progression or regression testing, and then it goes out to production. So there are quite a few hops on the path to production. Okay, and so using tools like like source control and CI/CD will help you get that repeatable deployment on the path to production. So what is CI/CD? Well, we like to call it DevOps and release management tools. Okay, CI/CD is actually short for continuous integration, continuous delivery. And on your screen there today, you'll see we have some click tools in the middle from our ISV partners like Capado, Gearset, and AutoRabbit. And in those particular tools, they've already done this scripting. There's no scripting. So they've already done this scripting. They're managing the application lifecycle management software. And so those particular tools will deploy. You'll get some ALM integration, which means it might connect to your Azure DevOps tasks or your Jira to update stories as the code moves through the path to production. It connects to your version control. So that's like your GitHub or your GitLab or your Bitbucket. It does some other things as well, just to make sure that that deployment is smooth every time. And a few more things, it will run your static code analysis. So if you haven't heard of that, that's okay. Something like PMD, so it'll run rules over your static code to find any low-hanging fruit vulnerabilities, such as DML inside for loops. And it can also kick off your automated testing as well. And so automated testing is testing like a human end to end. So it's logging into Salesforce like a human, clicking some buttons of a critical path, and then testing that we get to a certain screen just to make sure we haven't broken and caused a SEV one. It's really important for speed and agility. However, we're going to talk about the right-hand side today. So we're going to be looking at some scripts. Now, if you're an admin, the scripts might be a little, I guess, a little bit heavy for you, but there's going to be lots of business value, and it's going to be really interesting for you to understand exactly what something like Capado or Gearset or AutoRabbit does. Okay. Yeah, excellent. So on the right-hand side, these are the tools that we would put these scripts we're looking at today. So you've got Microsoft Azure DevOps, BuildKite, Jenkins, Bamboo. So if you've heard of these particular tools before, they're CI/CD tools, and this is where you would code a deployment pipeline using Salesforce Dx or Sfdx command line interface. Now, there's no one right answer. So if you're saying, Adam, well, which one should I go the left or the right hand side? There's no one right answer. On the there's considerations are what tools are already used in your organization. If you're an admin and you've got maybe 2 admins in your team and 1 developer, you probably go down the middle path of the App Exchange products. Okay, but if you're sitting in an enterprise with 50, 100 developers, then you might have technology already used in your organization. The organization mandates for you to use. You've got cyber compliance as well. If you want to evaluate that, make sure your cyber team is happy with whatever tool you're using. You're often transmitting code and data. Skills in team. If you're an admin, you won't be coding a pipeline. You might be actually, and of course budget. Okay, so there's no one right answer. You're really just going to have to evaluate and decide what's best for your team. Cool. So thinking about that right-hand side, we're just not going to go build a script. We'll have some guiding principles around it. And the first principle that everyone is going to want to listen to today is business value. So whether you code a pipeline script or not, it's really important to understand business value so you can speak to your manager about things that you want to do and provide the business value for it. So your manager can either give you funds for a tool or they can say yes for some of your time to do whatever it is you want to do. The second thing is, I think, is super important as well. Treat your pipeline like a product. This is not something that you do after 5 o'clock. So you'll plan it, you'll design it, you'll have a product owner for it, you'll put some Jiras or stories on a board, and then you'll prioritize those and add some to backlog and assign points. The third thing is keep it simple. Excuse me. Keep it simple. So start simple today. We've got a simple pipeline today, and then you can expand on that over time. But simplicity is the key here. Add ways of working to your developer guide. So if you don't have a developer guide today, I recommend you write one. That's your ways of working. What tools do we use? How do we log into our company? Do we have a VPN? Do we have a chat program like Slack? And so what tool do we use to deploy as well? You also put your coding standards on there as well. We use Lightning Flow instead of Process Builder. And also minimize manual steps. And so we all know what manual steps are. Maybe you have to assign some permission sets to users or load some config data. That's a manual step. Minimize your manual steps. And I think I see too often someone clicking a button on a permission set or profile. You've got to check that in. You've got to deploy that through your CICD or your CICD software. Clicking that one button will provide environment misalignment, and that's just no good for anyone. So really keep minimizing manual steps and only perform approved manual steps and put them on a run sheet. So those guiding principles in conjunction with your pipeline will really, give you a better chance of having that repeatable deployment out to production. So I think on the right-hand side here, you probably almost call this our agenda today. These are the pipeline steps. So we're going to be doing things like looking at what we need to install for our pipeline to work. We're going to log into a sandbox and or production. Today, I'm using a developer edition. I just happened to be doing a trailhead module, and I've decided to use this particular playground. I'm going to be creating a deployment package. It's really important to know, to understand that, hey, we're just not going to deploy everything. We want to deploy something. We're going to deploy today. So we're going to deploy a small package, and we're going to have a look at that code scanning. Now, I do have, not that I have on the agenda, I do have a little snippet for doing a destroy as well, a destroy of a component. That's awesome. So just a reminder, if you have any questions, chuck it in the chat panel. We'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So let's look at business value first. We always lead with business value. Why are we doing this? Why is your manager going to give you time or give you funds for a tool to help make deployments better. Well, business wants time to market. They want to increase their release frequency. They want to go faster. One of the biggest things I see in any market today is a business can be more successful if they can adapt and change at a quicker pace than their competitors. IT, they want to improve efficiencies, and they actually want to improve the time that they turn around their business value. Finance want to decrease cost of ownership, and they want to improve dev efficiency. And I think the most important thing is risk. So, if you trust that package, that repeatable deployment, of course, you're going to decrease your risk of introducing Sev1s into production and causing financial loss or disrepute to your brand. Okay, so these are the things you're going to talk about when you go to your manager to say, you know what, I want to improve our deployments. Let's go get a App Exchange product, or let's go write a CICD pipeline so that we can start to get some efficiencies and make our lives a lot easier and increase code quality, get agility and speed. And of course, there's going to be return on investment on anything that you do. Okay. Cool. So where do we start? Well, we've got our tool, we've got our build kite, we've got our Bamboo, we've got our Jenkins. The first thing we're going to do when writing our pipeline, deployment SH, is install things. Now you can do this on a base image or a Docker image, or you can put it right in the pipeline. My recommendation is you put it on the image or the Docker image, because you're going to get a faster runtime. You don't have to keep installing it every time the build runs. Okay. No considerations for the developer guide. Everything we talk about today, we want to talk about the developer guide, because that's your ways of working. And that is a really key artifact to have, to make sure everyone in your team is doing everything the same way and they know how to do it. But you could put on your developer guide how to set up your workspace and install developer tools like Visual Studio Code. And Visual Studio Code is for everyone. So in Visual Studio Code, you click a button to download some metadata from the sandbox to your PC. You don't have to use command line to do that. So Visual Studio Code is awesome for everyone. On the right-hand side, there's some modules there for further reading about how to install developer tools and continuous integration with Salesforce. Cool. A tip, this developer guide, one section on the developer guide, you should put all the applications that you use. If you use a chat program like Slack, if you use Visual Studio Code, but those other things that come along with Visual Studio Code, you might want to put a section on how to install Git and GitHub if you're using GitHub, how to install the CLI, and also, any IDEs like Visual Studio Code. So you really having those tools down there on or applications on your developer guide really speeds up the onboarding and value of someone coming onto your team as well. Cool. I've got some sample pipeline code here on the screen. You'll also get a workbook after today with this particular code here. I'm not going to demo this code because I've already got this installed on my PC, but this is just installing Sfdx, YQ, and Python. Now, let me explain what YQ and Python is. YQ is a little tool where we can easily read JSON in Bash. Python is similar to, I'll say, Apex, and Python is just a server-side language. And we're going to be using that for a special use case here today. You don't need to know how to write Python. I've got the script on the handbook. Excellent. So once we've installed our code, libraries, any libraries, so Sfdx command line interface, what are we going to do next on the pipeline? We're going to log into Sandbox or production. Okay, so how? We're going to use OAuth 2 web server authorization flow through a connected app. Okay, I'm not going to dig deep into how to actually connect Sfdx CLI to your sandbox, but the key things here is that you'll have a server key, a consumer key, and a username, and you're going to put those in your credentials manager of your CICD software. We're not going to store those in source control, because if you store it in source control, that's not really secure, ends up on everyone's PCs and so on and so forth, okay? On the right-hand side, you'll see a few modules there on how to create that connected app and connect your CI/CD software to your sandbox or production. And another tip, you can create a deployment user in production. And so when you create a sandbox, that deployment user is copied over to that sandbox with the username .sandbox name. So if I created a sandbox dev1, I would have a deployment user, cicd@company.com.dev1. And that's really cool. It's a cool thing to actually use a deployment user, because then you can have a look at setup audit trail and have a look to see who's doing manual steps and what CI/CD is deploying. It's really good for audit trail as well. And it also allows developers to deploy to sandboxes, but you don't necessarily need to give them admin access to that sandbox to deploy, right? So if you want to make sure that you only have 1 or 2 people doing the manual steps, you can still have lots of developers deploy without having access to the sandbox. Demo time, we're going to go log in. So I'm going to move the screen over to the left-hand side. And Gerlin, I'm just going to double check here. Can you see my Visual Studio Code?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Awesome. So we're going to log out before we log in. The reason why we log out, and that is what we call a try catch. The reason why we log out is because if we didn't previously log out, we might get an error when logging in. Awesome. So you can see there that we've successfully logged in and that we've got a particular session ID there. All right. So we're going to create a deployment package. So how do we package up the components? Well, there's some files, and we'll talk about how we package that up in a minute. The other part is there's a package XML. You don't have to use a package XML these days. In this example, we're still using one, but this package XML is automatically generated. And there's something else that we can do to craft our package, something called a forsignal.com, and we'll talk to that in a minute. On the right-hand side, there's further reading on a particular tool or plugin that I'm going to demo today. And this Sfdx plugin was put out by Sebastian and Mehdi from our services team over in the UK. And it's a really cool tool to have. Okay. The key thing here is developers shouldn't make decisions on what to deploy. They're just checking in code, and we want to formulate that package the same way every time. Okay. So here's a tip. The force ignore is a place where you can exclude files that just don't deploy. So maybe you have a permission set that has prod only attributes. You'd add that to your force ignore. Don't use your force ignore to try and design your package because your repo is too big, okay? Excuse me. Use force ignore to only exclude files, the 1 or 2 files that just don't deploy. So how should we package up our package? You've got 2 choices. You can deploy a full repository, and that's just checking out a branch or choosing a branch and deploying, or you can deploy via a Delta. My recommendation is deploying via a Delta, because if you're going to deploy the full repository all the time, first of all, it's going to take a long time to deploy. And secondly, your org might be too big and you might start to hit governing limits. So recommend Delta, and let's go see what options we've got for Delta. And again, admins, this is going a little bit deep now, but it's still good value for you because you can actually understand what happens, underneath the hood and the steps of the pipeline. So what is a Delta? Well, exactly like admins will do with change sets, it's some files. I'm going to pick a field. I'm going to pick a permission set. I'm going to pick a layout. But the developer is not going to choose the component. So how do we know what component? Well, we're going to decide based on commits. So by Git revision ID, we're going to say there's a point in time and all the components that have been changed or modified or deleted after a certain point in time, we're going to automatically bundle those up, okay? The second approach is let's bundle up based on a different master. And that simply means, what have I changed in my feature branch that is different from production, different from master? All those changes, we're gonna get that file list and we're gonna bundle up that change. We're gonna be showcasing the different master today. There's no one right solution. So what does identifying that components with Git, how does that actually work? So any files that are added, that's in green, that have been modified, they're the icons in yellow, and that have been deleted, they're the icons in red. Any files that are changed between two commits, we're going to get the file names, we're going to bundle those up, we're going to copy those to a deployment package, and we're going to deploy that package, not the entire repo. And we're going to be showcasing the Delta tool here, which is going to provide the files, our package XML, automatically provide our package XML, and it will automatically provide us a destructive file used to destroy components that you've deleted out of the repo. You know what? It's demo time. So we're going to go across to the Visual Studio Code now, and we're going to have a look at how this works. So you can see on the left-hand side here, I've got an empty output folder. I'm not going to install it today, but there's a little script there to install it. And the echo Y just means there is one question when installing it, and it's automatically going to choose Y for yes. So this particular command line here is going to do a diff from my current branch to master. And you can see my current branch is feature my project down there. So let's go ahead and run that command. It's a really quick command. You can see that that command is run. And now we can see the file that's been changed. Also, any dependent files that is needed for deployment, it'll grab those too. It'll give us our package XML. Our package XML has correctly identified that we've got an Apex class, and it's also provided us a destructive changes. Now, I put this destructive change code sample on late last night. I don't have a change, but we'll still run it anyway, and you can see it destroy no components. Excellent. So now that we've got our package, what are we going to do? We're going to validate or deploy. We're going to deploy using something called Sfdx force source deploy. Okay. On the developer guide, definitely recommend you add ways of working to your developer guide. How to commit code, how to get access to your CICD tool, whatever you're using, whether you're using an AppExchange product or whether you've got your own in-house tool with your own pipeline. How do I deploy to QA? What tool do I go to? What buttons do I press to deploy to QA? Deploying to QA, staging in production should be one press of a button. Excellent. For more information on the force source deploy, the command line interface on the right-hand side, there's a reference to the Sfdx command line interface for all your options for Sfdx CLI. So let's go deploy, and we're gonna reference that package XML that was created, stipulating our one class. Awesome. So it's logged a job and it's now in progress and it's now done. Wow. Wouldn't it be awesome if all deployments were that quick? If we were in a crowd, everyone would laugh. Anyway, so we're not in a crowd, we're virtual, but we all know that deployment usually needs tests running. So what are my options for tests? Well, most of the time these days, you might be running local tests. That's running all tests. And the second option we have that I want to show you today is running specified tests. some tests. Well, let's go have a look to see what they look like. So if you're running all tests today, your org, over time, you'll get more tests, and it'll take longer and longer to validate and deploy. And so you're gonna start to reduce your speed and agility. How can we keep that speed and agility the same that it is today and in the future? Well, instead of running all tests, we can run something called specified tests. Here's the key between the two. If you run all tests, there's a mandate. Salesforce mandates you have 75% org-wide coverage. You can slip that one Apex class in. It'll reduce your all-wide coverage. You probably get a successful deployment. With specified tests, each Apex class you have in your deployment package must be covered minimum 75%. You can't slip that one class in without coverage, okay? But if you're deploying one class, then you only need to cover that one class, and you only need to run one test class. You don't have to run all. So that's where you get your speed. 5 minutes or 4 hours. What test should you run? Well, there's something cool called Sibling specified test, and it simply means this: if you've got an Apex class, then by ways of working, by process, go create a corresponding test class, name it _test. Cover that class minimum 75%. On the right-hand side is a little bit of pseudocode, which just describes how to actually automate the identification of those classes and include that in your pipeline. But we've got the script here for today, and I'm going to demo it right now. So it's demo time. So on the screen here, we're going to demo deploying, and we're going to automatically identify that we have this one Apex class in there, and we're going to throw a test class at it. So to generate the test class names, we're going to use a Python script, and you'll get this script in the workbook. Awesome. So as you can see, it was really quick to run. You can see that I'm trying to throw two names at this deployment now. So I'm going to throw data manager activity test and data manager underscore activity underscore test. So underscore test is the deviation. Maybe a developer accidentally used underscore test, or maybe they didn't use an underscore. We're just going to try throwing both of those names at there. So we're now going to deploy running specified tests using the test class string that was generated from the previous command. And we're using a source deploy. Now this takes a little bit longer than our previous deployment because we are running tests. So first of all, we all know the two green circles. First of all, it's going to compile, okay? And that was one component. Now the second component is just running tests here. And so as you can see at the bottom of the screen, it is, it's running those tests. And Gerline, I know we're a few minutes over, probably about 5 minutes, and we'll be in Q&A.
Sounds good.
Awesome. So we're almost done here, and we're done. And I'll tell you what, we've run that test class and we've got 100% coverage on that class. However, we actually failed the assertion. The test class assertion was expecting 241 and the actual is 794. But that's okay. We've successfully identified the classes in our package. We've auto-generated the test class names, and we've actually baked that into the deployment pipeline without the developers having to choose what test classes to run. And that's super, super powerful. That's reducing manual steps. Awesome. Oh, actually, as well as that, so a little bit of a addition to this is we've got the destructive as well here to show you. So as I alluded to before, Mehdi and Sebastian's plugin, Git Delta, also automatically creates this destructive change. Now, I didn't have time to bake in a destructive change, but we're going to run this anyway. So what happens is with that particular XML file, destructive XML, plus a blank package. Okay, so we've got a blank package XML in the manifest. Yep. It's coming from another repo. Trust me, it's blank. With a blank package XML, we're going to actually run a destructive, which means anything that you deleted out of your repository, it's going to automatically, excuse me, it's going to automatically add it to destructive and then destroy it. So you can see there that we've actually copied a few files across to that output folder that was generated by the Git Delta plugin. And then we're going to run the destructive. When you're running any deployment, you do need to specify at least one test. Production deployments mandate tests being run, even though we're not actually deploying components. So you can see there that was successful. Unfortunately, I didn't have a file that was destroyed, but the whole process, obviously from A to B, worked end to end. If there was something in there, and if that component was still in the org, it would destroy it. If you've previously run a destroy on that component before, it's going to gracefully fail. Excellent. And the last thing I wanted to demo today was code scanning. So if you haven't heard of code scanning before, it's scanning your code before it hits Salesforce, static code analysis. Excuse me. So if you're a developer today and you've installed PMD and you're using Ant and invoking that Ant target, well, I got news for you. The Salesforce Cli Scanner plugin takes care of all that for you, and it's a simple command line. I'm going to show it to you today. So on the developer guide, we do recommend that you put coding standards and practices, best practice to Apex unit testing. If you've got a trigger framework, put that on your developer guide so everyone writes triggers the same way, and even little things like naming convention. Code scanning will look for things like best practice, errors, design, documentation, performance, and security. You can even put your own rules in there as well. Demo time. So what we're going to do is, I'm not going to install the scanner today. There's a command here. You'll get this workbook after today. You'll get this workbook after today, the list of rules there that's available. So what we're going to do is, in our output folder that Git Delta plugin copied all the files to, we're going to say, hey, we want to run scanning over that folder. Just the files that we've changed, the deployment package, any triggers as well. We're also going to say we're going to run these categories. And I'm running all categories today, but you might want to run one and fix up the errors and then run the next one. And here's the Sfdx scan run command to actually run the code scanning. So let's put 100% of that in the command line here. And excellent. So it only takes a few seconds to run. It's not connecting with Salesforce. It's running on your PC or your CICD tool. And you can see there that it has picked up some violations. And of course, if you were running this in a CICD tool, you would output the results as JUnit, and that's easily received by your CICD tool to have it nicely printed on the screen or sent in an email. Okay. Excellent. Well, I tell you what, I mean, we covered a lot of things there today. On your screen right now, there's a little barcode you can scan, and we'll also provide this barcode later on as well, where you get access to the equip page. Probably a couple hours after this session, we'll have this presentation deck on that page. We'll also have the recording on that page as well. Okay, and so on this particular page, all the modules or trailhead modules that we went through today that we're further reading. And there was also some other links as well there. The Architect's Guide to Migrating Changes. And we've got something called architect.salesforce.com now, put out by Developer Evangelism, or Architect Evangelism, I should say, Zane Turner. And we're putting a whole heap of stuff there for those developers, architects, solution designers. And you know what? Every admin is a solution designer. So it's for everyone. I'll tell you what, with that, Gurleen, I might hand over to you.
Thank you, Adam. This was so much good information. I'm so glad we had this session today. And this is end to end. I'm really thankful for you to join us today.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Perfect. So we're going to start the Q&A, but before the Q&A, I would like everyone to use this code or the QR code to fill in a feedback form. And whoever fills in the feedback form would be part of our duck race. And we have a special swag prize for that. So I would be super excited if you would like to go in and give us feedback, fill in the form, and after the Q&A, we'll do the duck race. And if you have any questions, go ahead and share in the chat window, and we can go ahead and Adam can answer those.
Awesome. No questions. No questions.
Really quiet people here.
Wow.
So Shirish is asking, do you use Cumulus CI?
Thanks for your question. I actually haven't heard of Cumulus CI, but what we saw today was a .sh or bash script, and that's generally in your CICD software. You'll either create a task to run a script, or with something like Azure DevOps, you would create a YAML, which would then call a script, a bash script. So yeah, if you're using Cumulus CI today, then wherever you invoke a script or run a pipeline bash script is where you grab today's code and put it there and have a play. Excellent. We've got any more questions, Gurleen?
Yes, we. So can we use, Gomti says, can we use AWS code commit as a code commit repository than GitHub?
Yeah, you know what? Absolutely. So any source control management software that supports Git can be connected up to your CI/CD pipeline. Generally, your CI/CD tool will have native plugins to check out your repository and also check out your branch. If you don't have those native tools, if your CI/CD software doesn't have those native plugins, for instance, BuildKite is a really techy developer CI/CD tool. It's an awesome tool, but you got to write bash script to clone a repository and check out that branch. So you can use any source control management tool such as GitLab, Bitbucket to clone, check out the repository, check out the branch rather, and then use that code to start creating your package on your pipeline.
Perfect. Thank you. Did that answer your question? Perfect. The next one I have here is, give me 1 second. I think I have to extend this.
Lots of questions. That's awesome.
Yeah. Is there a way to pull the changes metadata based on created modified by?
Yeah. And who's that by? Is that
Zane?
Zane. All right, Zane. You know what? We could probably answer this one of two ways. So if you're pulling the changes from your source control management tool down to your PC or down to your CI/CD software, no, you're essentially cloning and pulling down the latest code when you check out a branch, you can pull down just the commits or the head of that branch. You don't have to pull down all references. So that's called a shallow clone. If you're talking about having, so you've got to have all the commits of a particular branch at least on your CI/CD software. So if you're talking about pull the changes or identify then maybe a git diff or a point in time, that's where we alluded to creating a package based on a point in time, based on a git ID. There's another way that you can actually identify. You can use a git log and do a since then, and you can say, I want all changes for the last 3 months. So using some git commands like git log and git diff, you can do a few things. I recommend you use the git delta package to bundle up and use the syntax. I think you can put a since then in there as well, because that creates a package XML, it creates a destructive. I hope that answered your question, Zane.
Yes, he says thank you.
Awesome.
The next one is, can we use only Bitbucket and Sfdx and archive entire CICD?
And achieve the entire CICD. And I think that's I got this question up now, Thorin. So, you know what? The pipeline that we've shown today is a pipeline to be used on a CI/CD tool. Bitbucket is a source control tool. And of course, the CI/CD tool, there's Bitbucket pipeline you can use as acting like a CI/CD tool. You've got Bamboo, which is Atlassian's, we'll say proper CI/CD tool. Yeah, you got to have a CI/CD tool, and you put this pipeline, this code that you've written on that pipeline. If you don't have the skills in your team, you don't want to. You're using change sets today. You want a little bit more. There are some tools out there on the App Exchange like AutoRabbit, Bitbucket, GearSet. There are other tools on the App Exchange. So the Learn More page, the page before this one, there was a link to the App Exchange, and it's searching for deployment. Click Deploy, a few other ones in the market that are used by lots of our beloved trailblazers and are quite successful. So yeah, if you don't want to use a CI/CD tool and scripting, recommendation is you have a look at one of those tools that are on the market. Some companies have compliance. Maybe they're in a regulated industry, the financial service industry, government. That you might have data residency as well, regulations that you need to comply. So whatever tool you're going to use, it's always a good idea to head over to your cyber team to make sure that tool is okay to use in your organization, just so that you can stay compliant with whatever regulatory or policies you have for your company.
Perfect. Thank you. Did that answer your question, Arun? All right. Let's go on to the next one. The next one we have is, you mentioned about open source tool.
That's a good question. So on the Salesforce Dx slide, what we say about open source, it's not Salesforce. So Git is open source. Some of the tools like Jenkins is open source. So there are many open source tools. Visual Studio Code is open source. So there's many open source tools that, as developers of other technologies such as Java and PHP and .NET, they're the tools that you're already using today in your particular developer ecosystem. And Salesforce Dx allows you, command line interface allows you to use those tools in the Salesforce space as well.
Perfect. Those were a lot of good examples. Thank you. The next one is, Capado can pull changes based on the last mod, when, and by.
Yeah. I can talk track that one as well. Thanks, Katie. That's a good point. So when we use Visual Studio Code here today to download components from your org to your PC, that's what's called an IDE. Capado, although we've talked about Capado today, and GearSet and AutoRabbit as a CICD deployment tool, it also acts like an IDE, okay? And so what Capado is doing is probably using, and you can use a source pull and push to use, they might have some other smarts, but in a Visual Studio Code world, you could do a pull and push rather than a retrieve from your sandbox. That'll use something called source tracking that is available with sandboxes as well as scratch orgs. And that basically pulls components that you've modified, added or deleted down to your local PC, and then you commit that to source control. Something like Capado will do all that in a nice synchronous, kind of more declarative, easy to use for you. And those products are awesome and have great, point to click things for those folk who don't necessarily want to get into something like Visual Studio Code. They're awesome tools. So they're actually acting like an IDE as well.
The next question is, does Sfdx support deep cloning feature?
Thanks for that great question, Akhilesh. That's probably a question of the day. I'll tell you what, so deep cloning. So when we talk about cloning, we're cloning a source control repository. Usually that's your own bash commands or your CICD software, pulling that SCM or pulling that repo, that code down from your source control management tool like Bitbucket or GitLab or GitHub down to your CICD tool. So are there plugins for Sfdx? There might be. The Git Delta is when you've already got plugins on your, you've already got code sitting on your PC or your CICD repo, CICD tool, and it just packages up changes using Git commits. You know what? I would Google Sfdx plugins for cloning, and you'd have to rely on the plugin features, whether you can do a shallow or deep clone of that repository, or and more importantly, probably the branch as well, right? So we have 15 dependent packages. I can read this next one, Gerline. We have 15 dependent packages. So this is getting into your package-driven development model, the one on the right-hand side early on in the session. We have 15 dependent packages and everything we create. And every time we create a new scratch org, part of building developer pushes, this is an expensive step, and it will take like 60 minutes to install all dependent packages. Any thoughts on optimizing this step? So, Sharish, I feel your pain. The guiding principle of package-driven development is you're extending one or two or three packages, maybe one package with a couple of dependent ones, and you're not installing 15 every time you're building a scratch org. So if you're creating a scratch org and if you have 15 packages in production and you're putting those 15 on that scratch org every time, you're probably not really following package-driven development as it was designed. It was only really designed for small changes on packages, small changes on small packages, and that's where you get the speed of not having to wait to create a whole sandbox. If you don't, if you are putting those 15 on, maybe package-driven development isn't for you. Maybe you should go back to org development model. Okay, so try and have a ways of working where you only have to put one package on a scratch org that maybe has 2 or 3 dependencies. So you know what? If you go to my LinkedIn, there's a session just underneath my name called Speed and Agility. on that particular, and it's a video. On that particular video, there's a slide. There's 2 slides, one with vertical and one with horizontal slicing of packaging. And it's myself and a guy called Usman Sagana. Have a look at that and see if you can optimize your packaging, either vertical or horizontal. There's no one right way to do it. If you can't find it, again, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm sure there's not too many Adam Best in the Salesforce ecosystem, and I'll provide you a copy of that deck as well. So go maybe structure it horizontal, vertical. You'll start to get maybe 1 or 2 dependencies and not 15. And if you're still finding it's taking that long, there's a couple of things that you could do. You could automate. You could create a pipeline that we saw today specifically for creating a scratch org. In other words, create a scratch org, create a user, because no one will have access to that scratch org because the pipeline created it. Create a user. Usually you can grab the user details based on the person who's running the pipeline build in your CICD software. Install all the packages. And then at the end of it, send an email to the user to say, hey, your scratch org is built. That way, even though it still takes an hour, developers not waiting an hour per se, or spending an hour on effort doing all those installations. Again, you want more info or more help, happy for you to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'll help you with some scripts. Okay. Brilliant. All right, Gerline, I think we're just on about time and we don't have any more questions. So
I will go ahead and do a quick check on how many people just filled in the form, and I had quite a few here. And we have the duck race.
Awesome.
So
I will stop sharing and I'll hand over to you. Awesome.
Yeah, and this time I'll do something different. So I'll just have everyone's name so we know by name who's winning. Give me 1 second. And Adam, you're the part of the duck race too. Maybe you'll win.
Oh, all right. We're gonna have to exclude me if I win that one. I tested the feedback form.
All right, we'll play it again if you win.
Yeah. You want to share your screen there?
Yes. Now I'm going to share my screen.
Awesome. Awesome.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
What an awesome game.
I think this is. Oops. My apologies. Because I changed it. So I took everyone's name and set it for 10 seconds. And let's see who wins. There. We have Adam Bomb. Let me just stop that. Is Adam in here? Adam, you want to say hi? I asked.
I think you need to unmute him.
Yeah, I tried.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, congratulations.
Yay.
Thank you. Quite a good duck there. I like the color.
Perfect. I hope you enjoyed the session today.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I got a lot of value out of it. I think, I'm a little bit more on the admin side, but the optimization of manual steps and the potential time saved, through some of those options, I think is amazing. So definitely excited to try some of it out and get going.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you for joining. And I'll reach out to you for your gift. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I am going to update this information in the chatter group for Ashburn VA group, and Gua is going to update it for the McLean group. And so hopefully soon you will have the slides as well as the recording for the event. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Gurleen and Guhar, and again, thank you, viewers and participants today. Really hope you got as much out of this session as Adam did. Yeah, it's events like these that we love doing. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate you.
Thank you, everyone.